Wow. Hello, good afternoon, good morning for those of you coming in from the US, and good evening if you're dialing in from APAC. Welcome to Women in Hospitality, Travel, Tech, or the Diversity Inclusion Talks, Episode 2. My name is Devi Virdi. I'm leading diversity inclusion here at WHTT. Previously, I was running the operations and the commercial functions for Northern Europe at HRS. And prior to that, I've worked for some large global hospitality players in the hotel space, as well as within the global travel community. And I've been in travel for now 20 years. So my background's in HR, and today's topic is all about intersectionality and coming out at work. And what parts do you bring to work? So our panelist will be in conversation for 40 minutes, and I will involve questions from you, our audience, during the session. Right, so I'd like to now introduce and welcome today's panelists that we have today. So firstly, we have Kate Shirley. So Kate has been in the travel industry for 25 years with employers such as Midway Airlines, Amex GBT, and now she's been at BCD and her role is as Senior Product Marketing Manager there. She was named one of Atlanta's 50 most outstanding individuals for the LGBTQ community for her nonprofit work. She's been on the Georgia Equality Board of Directors and has worked as a nonprofit resource for present at Atlanta's Pride Annual Marketplace and Parade. She currently lives in Atlanta with her wife of 15 years and their 3 rescue pit bulls. Welcome, Kate. So delighted to have you here on the show with us today.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
We then have Brett Rance. So Brett was born in South Wales to South African parents. He grew up in Israel and in the US, and having lived in India, the Middle East, Europe, Brett is a classic example of a third culture kid. I love that, Brett. Growing up with a multicultural background and having parents who were open-minded eased the way for self-realization and acceptance of being gay, and that it was okay to be different. Coming out of high school, Brett spent time in US Marines or accepted to the US Naval Academy. Now, fate, however, stepped in, and he was discharged for being gay in 1987. So think about it, 1987. Whilst this could have had a negative experience, he found the vast majority of his fellow cadets to be supportive and not at all fussed with his sexuality. This was definitely a defining moment, and Brett realized that he could just be. So having spent many years working in sort of the traditional conservative culture, Brett has allowed his personality and interactions to really generate the conversations of being gay and being part of the LGBTQ community, and he enjoys the opportunity to educate. Brett has been in the travel industry for over 30 years and is currently a freelance consultant supporting various initiatives with Eureka Consulting. Welcome, Brett. So delighted to have you here with us today.
Thanks, Devi. Looking forward to it.
And finally, we have Warren Nadeau. So Warren Warren, you have been in the travel industry for 38 years. I salute you.
Old.
So Warren,
Seasoned.
Seasoned, exactly, right? Starting in the industry in his hometown in Boston. So his career focused on agency operations in technology and leadership roles. Warren relocated to Dallas with his family in 1991. And in 92, whilst he was at Thomas Cook Travel, he was part of a 6-person global team at AAHQ. And that was responsible for developing, can you believe this, the first turbo Sabre TMC prototype. Wow, this is going so far back. Warren worked for TRX, which is now SAP Concur, and Sabre. So we're talking BTS and Get There, before joining BCD, where as a sales engineer he was initially. And he spent 21 years across various roles within the organization, from account management to the technology sales side and the business development side. As VP of Global Business Solutions, he helped to secure BCD's largest wins and retaining those clients. Warren left BCD back in 2018 to start his own travel-related business, which was put on hold due to COVID this spring. Wow, that's incredible. Warren came out as a gay man to his family in 98 and to colleagues in 99. He met his now husband 17 years ago. They legally wed in 2013. And he enjoys volunteering at numerous events in their small town and spearheads fundraising for the local food pantry and the animal shelter. They are the first LGBTQ couple to be featured family for their town's community magazine, which is so timely because it's coming out this week. Oh my goodness.
Hasn't come out yet. I don't know. Crazy.
Has it not? Okay, well, you must share it with us. Wow, what an incredible bios you all have. And thank you so much. I'm incredibly honored to have you all here today and really look forward to the conversation that we have ahead. So to really set the scene here and to kick off this episode, I think it would be best if I started by exploring what intersectionality is. And in its modern use, it was a term that was coined by a lady called Kimberly Crenshaw. So she's a law scholar, she's an academic, and she's now an activist, and she's in the US. In 1989, in a paper, she talks about a critique. In fact, it's an anti-discrimination work in how it fails, basically, Black women, in that a lot of anti-discrimination in theory, in practice, doesn't explore the overlapping experience of Black women, right? So she effectively talks about intersectionality as it's like an intersection of traffic. So where vehicles come in on all four different angles. So if you're standing in the middle, you basically have danger coming in all four directions. So really, it's a definition to sum up the idea of multiple threats, of discrimination on a day-to-day basis. And I guess it's a really useful term, you know, to explore the broader patterns of discrimination, whether it's domination, whether it's oppression, right? In the way that a colored woman would face misogyny that's different to a white woman. But of course, this can be applied across all identities, including the LGBTQ. So that is what intersectionality is. It's effectively the layers of identity that we identify with. And I guess I look at myself and I ask, you know, what do I identify myself with, right? What are my identities? You know, okay, so I'm a woman of color. I'm from Hong Kong, so I have both Chinese and Indian in my DNA. I'm British, hell yeah, I've been here for 20 years, so I say I am British as well. I'm straight and I'm a mother. So those are my layers. And for me, it's incredibly important, you know, who I work for, who my employer of choice is, allows me to bring my whole self to work. Because that's when I'm at my best. That's when I really can deliver and give 100%. But I'm also very honest with myself, is that I haven't been able to do that, you know, across all my career journeys. So, you know, Kate, tell us, you know, perhaps about your identity layers and what have you brought out at work and how has that impacted you?
Well, my layers are a wife first. I'm white. I am a gay woman, and I am a activist. And I'll include that in my layers because it's so important to me. And what I will say about what I bring to work is that from the very beginning, I have brought my entire self to work. You'll hear me talk about representation a lot because it's so important to me. I respect people who are in the closet and have chosen not to come out. But I think that identifying myself as gay and in the community only broadens our message and helps more people identify with us. So I have always brought my whole self to work.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure you would agree with me that not everybody does that, right? You know, not everybody does that, particularly from a sexuality point of view. I mean, you know, Brett, what are your thoughts on this?
I completely agree, and you know, from my perspective and where I'm coming from, my intersectionality is like the roundabout at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. I have so many different intersections and layers given just a bit of the crazy background that I've got. You know, I'm white, I'm male, I'm gay. Am I African? Am I British? Am I Dutch? And then, you know, going back, you know, from my ancestors, add to that Indian and Asian as well. So for me, it's kind of hard to identify and sometimes and to put a thumbtack and pinpoint who I am. But more than anything, what I like to think of is, you know, I'm kind of a whole that enjoys to, you know, mentor, coach, and educate through my interactions. So whether that's bringing awareness of who I am and my culture and my lifestyle into areas which may be a bit more conservative, or you know, and also in the business perspective of, you know, what we're doing from a business wise. So that's really, for me, you know, I'm probably a little bit more muddy in that area than you know, being a bit more of a traditionalist.
That's really, that's so insightful, isn't it? Because even with comparatively, I mean, we're all different people, right? And it's really interesting to hear Kate, you know, say, you know, I do bring my whole self in, and that's me, and how it varies for you, and you know, varies for you. Warren, what about you?
Well, you know, it's interesting, and kind of like with what Brett said, you know, I think my layers evolved. So if you had talked to me in the early 90s, my layers would have been a straight man, you know, with a wife and 2 children, and certainly the work components. But then shifting to late 90s, you know, it is now I'm a gay man, I'm a husband, I have a gay son. And, you know, I'm at that point, like you said, I'm in that mentoring stage where there is so much uncertainty out there, and there's a lot of these young folks looking for direction. And the funny thing is, for folks my age, you know, we were so consumed with labels and when do we come out, and not, I mean, some of us were, some were not. But what's encouraging is these generations now, the labels aren't there. It's that love is love thing.
Right.
That's refreshing.
Did you feel isolated at all in your experience, you know, earlier on, perhaps? And I'm not picking on you because of age.
No, certainly I don't mind. You know, it was interesting because we all have our stories, and so for me, I had to deal with it personally first. So what I was about to do was disrupt my ex-wife and my kid's life, you know, by making that decision. So what helped me is, this is, you know, going back to AOL days. AOL had chat rooms, and there were other people just like me. So that was kind of the courage, that got me really going with. I'm sorry, I get distracted by the dog here, but that's really where the difference is, being where I was as a straight man to a gay man, that I am more open and certainly myself than I was before. It was a lot harder back then, I think, because I was just trying to identify different layers of myself. So I take care of the personal side first, and then the work part was easy because I did the toughest.
Wow. And Kate, you know, I guess when you sort of said right in the beginning, you know, I've this is me, right? You know, I expect people to expect and accept me for who I am. Did you have a stage? And I know that, and you know, this is a safe space. So did you have a stage in your career where, you know, coming out at work or sharing with your colleagues or your boss or as an employer, you know, did that affect you? Did you have any challenges that you had to confront or overcome that you could share?
The good news is that I was wholly accepted. There was never an issue. And I think, just from my viewpoint, and guys, you can jump in, but I think just in general for women, it's more acceptable when you're gay. You don't, you know, because it's has been a man's world. It won't always be. But, you know, predominantly with work, there was no pushback at all. There was an interesting story that I'll share with you guys is when we rebuilt a new team, and this is before I even came out, and I would never consider myself in the closet because I've always really knew that I could be with a man or a woman at the time. So it was never a closeted situation for me. It's just a matter of time before I actually fell in love with a woman. So we were doing a get to know you bingo. If you guys ever, know that, find somebody who speaks Spanish, find somebody who's African American. And even before I was identifying as gay, I would volunteer if there was no gay person in the room. I'm like, I'll be the lesbian. So it was never a situation for me to, I was never ashamed. And I think that is, due to how I was raised. My parents were very inclusion oriented across the spectrum. So my work has been fantastic. I've been with the same company between when I was serial dating men to being married and with somebody for 15 years now. So.
So that's really impressive, isn't it? So, and you are at BCD, so it's really impressive to really see that, as a global, travel management company, even within the realms, right? And it's global, that there is that level of acceptance at where you sit, right? In your role as well, which is really key. Because I guess sometimes in global organizations, what happens on one side of the world doesn't necessarily happen on the other side of the world, right? And every region is very different. And that's where that whole cultural element also comes in. Brett, what about yourself? How has, you shared with us that, you were in the US Marines. This is incredible. I've never met anybody who's been in the US Marines, so this is amazing. But, is it obviously, how has it affected you from a work point of view? So being in the travel sector, in the industry?
Interestingly enough, when I started my travel career, it was actually in Dallas, Fort Worth with American Airlines. Again, very open, very inclusive back in the mid-late 80s. And then in 89, I went to work for the company that evolved into BCD Travel. So, like Kate, like Warren, 27 odd years at BCD Travel. So, I grew up in that organization. And to be completely fair, that organization really provided the openness, the support. The people with whom we worked were supportive. For me, the first week after I'd started there, the girls were kind of twittering behind my back in the department that I was in, and I was like, what's going on? Because they're all looking at me and kind of doing this. I thought, what the hell? And then they said, well, where were you on Friday night? And I said, just out in Dallas with friends. And they said, you weren't by any chance wearing like leather and jeans, were you? And I thought, ooh, they spotted me. So, I happened to be going to a bar with friends, and, so that was pretty much my coming out at the organization. I've never looked back since. Going back to something that you'd mentioned about, the way things are, on one side of the globe versus the other, that's where I always looked at myself as a little bit of a, kind of unofficial ambassador for being gay or being open and being, pretty much point blank and about this, to the point where, in India, when I was there for quite a long time and we're setting up our outsource offshore solution, I found it very interesting to sit down and talk with people, and I was very open about, they had questions, they were eager, they were intrigued, so I was always just very, very open, not worried about, any sort of repercussion, because there was genuine interest, there wasn't any judgment, and so strangely enough, then, my boss was gay, several of my employees that we brought over were gay, so finally. One of our directors in India came up to me and was like, sir, can I have a good discussion with you? I said, yeah, sure. He's like, do you only hire gay men at BCD? And I thought,
we try.
Well, yeah. And I was like, well, no, but these just happen to be the people and what have you that happen to fit the bill in this department and working. So I always remember that as a little bit of a funny anecdote.
Yeah. What an incredible story, right? Because it's again, you're always, and I think if I look back at my career from a professional sort of on the commercial side, coming out of HR, when you're bringing and building teams, right? I got to a point where I was very specific in terms of what and who I wanted in my team, right down to, because I knew that it had to reflect, my customers. It had to reflect the product that I was promoting or the business was promoting. And the reality was that if I didn't have that diverse team and I was also the only non-white person, it just didn't work, right? And it's really interesting that you say that, because there is a real, I look at organizations today, and what's startling, and you can all see it, particularly in, and I'll go back to travel, right? Organizations that have instigated, all these employee network models, right? So what I mean by that is, employee resource groups, such as, the cultural network group or the gender network group, right? So if it's a female group, so to speak, or a women's only group, the LGBTQ network group, it's staggering to think that this has only just come about, right? Because of the recent momentum, because of the recent change. And, all I'm saying, particularly to leaders in the industry that are listening in or tuning in, is, encourage those conversations, right, within those groups, is, and those insights, and take recommendations, pay attention to that diversity within those networks. It's key, because that is where, right, that is where you as a leader, whether you're heading up the consulting team, whether you're heading up the sourcing team, whether you're going to be heading up hotel solutions team, that's where you are going to get ideas to address your policies. That's where you're going to get, where you address retention, where it's progression, talent, you name it, engagement. I would even say to the chief people officer, that's where you need to be looking at. And I think, yeah, go on. Sorry, Kate.
I was going to say, as a consumer and looking at different businesses, and even as somebody who was recently furloughed and was looking for a job, I'm looking to identify with myself. Do you know what I mean? What do you offer? Does your team look like me? Are there people of color included? I'm no longer going to spend my dollars on organizations that don't offer a seat to every single person at the table. I think it's so imperative that decision makers represent their customers with who they have sitting at their table. There has to be a seat for everybody, because people are no longer just blindly buying. They want to know that they're represented at that organization, whether it's work or consumer. So important.
Exactly.
And Warren, how has, for you, I mean, you mentioned, for in your bio, you came out to colleagues in 99, right? So how has that affected you from a workplace environment? Did it affect you? Did you feel that you had to, were there elements of you that you felt that you couldn't share, that you wanted to?
No, and the thing is, I had just started. I was probably a year into my career, 22 years at BCD. So BCD was really the only company that I actually was my authentic self. So when I did come out, it was a huge relief. It actually gave me the ability to be more of my authentic self. Since so much of my role, has been with sales support and sales engineer, you had to adapt to different teams and different personalities, folks that may not like you, and things like that. So that the amount of support was amazing. And when I did come out, it's just like when I came out with my family, like, you're still the same person. So it wasn't an issue. I reported to Mike Jensen directly, as a gay man, Ellen Trodejo, some really great industry icons who have been nothing but phenomenal mentors for me, because we really didn't have, and I know we'll be talking about that, but we didn't really have those in the industry who kind of look up to, who is the LGBTQ representative. Right. So I've been like Brett and Kate, been very, very fortunate to have some great leaders who just accepted me, who I was as an authentic person.
And it's really interesting because actually, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you haven't felt that you've had to sacrifice other parts of you, right? When making that, when coming out or covering something else, right? Whatever that something else might be, is it you felt that you didn't have to sacrifice anything else once you made that decision or once that happened?
Right.
No, and I think that's a great point to make for the younger generation coming out, although I don't think that they struggled at all. In this day and age, it's love is love and they're accepted. But for anybody who is questioning coming out, I think that it's just such a great environment now. You know, I've talked to a couple people, the millennials that came out, and it was like, you know, I'm gay. Okay, pass the ketchup. Like there's no there's no ramifications. And I think that now I'm not across the board.
They don't identify, Kate. I mean, a lot of them are love is love. It's like, okay, I like, you know, I like this male, I like a female, I like transgender. It's whoever the person is. It's encouraging.
Now, you know, don't get me wrong. I don't walk through the halls of my headquarters with the pride flag. You know what I mean? I'm not going to. I treat it just as my straight allies and colleagues do. You know, if somebody asked me how my weekend was, I'd be like, my wife made me do yard work, you know? And so I think the more that we normalize things and we're not ashamed to talk about this stuff, they're going to be like, I like her and she's gay. So there's going to be people who, you know, say they don't know a gay person, which I challenge, obviously. But what an opportunity missed to not know Brett's authentic self or Warren's authentic self, because now we know he's a great guy. He was a Marine and he's gay. So we've crossed all of those lines, and it's a missed opportunity. And I know there's some, you know, I'll get some pushback, but for people not to come out of the closet and not to be their authentic selves, I think sets us back a bit, but I certainly respect their decision to do so.
And I second that too. You know, from a perspective of, you know, like where we live in London, you know, our next door neighbor, you know, he fought in World War II. You know, just really, you know, staunch. I wouldn't say conservative, but you know, not necessarily a person that's kind of been, you know, open to people of a different sexuality. But he and his wife just think the world, you know, and we've had conversations and really opened their hearts and minds and around, you know, they know someone who's gay. And then they start thinking, it's like, oh, well, what, you know, maybe this person that I knew back when I was in the service, because this is the way that they acted. And it's like, gosh, what kind of struggles did they go through? And it's been really nice to have, you know, again, that awareness, that education, that engagement around that. Yeah, I again, I'm just me, and as are, you know, Kate and Warren, we're just ourselves. And having known these guys for 20 odd years, and I can say, and you guys can beat me up later for this, I knew them before they came out.
Yeah, wow.
So, you know, it's been interesting to also see the evolution there as well. And, you know, Kate, I remember, God, you know, years ago, you and me in Fort Worth at sitting down and over drinks and having discussions about this. So, you know, to see who you are and what you've done now is phenomenal. And Warren, you know, you and Steve, and you know, in your town, and I just love seeing how you guys are just open. You know, you're volunteering with the fire department, with emergency services, and you guys are setting such an incredible natural example. And I think that's fantastic.
I mean,
thank you, friend.
And that's where we all, absolutely. And I think this is where, as individuals, kind of like with some of the movements that are going on, we all have to pick a lane. You know, we're good at some things and others. So, you know, for to your point, Steve and I, to fit into this small, very conservative Texas town, you know, as a gay couple, you know, we've certainly have changed the mindset of what people perceived, I think, gay folks to be like. And that's the thing. It's like we're all very unique in our situations and our stories. And if we are comfortable putting the flag out in our front door, great. Some of us are not, and that's okay. So that's the thing. We have to pull together. And I mentioned this too in our call, because typically in the LGBT community, at least from my experience, I think others have come across this as well, is we eat our own. So I think we have been fighting so long for a unique niche that, you know, within our own circles, we're like, oh, okay, what are they trying to do? And why are they acting like that? Or are they giving us a bad name? The media would put everybody with their flags and Speedos, you know, on the TV, and that's what we look like. So this is where we need to be out there, you know, and just showing the world.
We could have a whole other session about that, Warren, about the fact that as gay people who have been repressed and picked apart, we tend to do that to our own community too.
Absolutely, we do.
Which is
Wow.
a problem.
Yep.
That's completely new, right? That's new territory for me altogether. But it's powerful. It is so incredibly powerful, you know. And I guess, you know, it leads on to, you know, and actually to the audience. I didn't realize that Kate, Warren, and Brett knew each other before we got together. So that's really important. But, you know, I think what's really crazy is, you know, I think about, you know, the sector, and I look at, who do I know, right, as a senior leader, whether it's male or female, that is from the LGBTQ community, that is that role model. And I now look at you three and I think, gosh, you're my role models, right, in that space, you know. And I think it's incredible. It's you know, it is awesome. But who do you, what are your thoughts, you know, individually on role models here? And it's more and more about, for me, than that next generation coming in, right? You know, can they align? Does it need to be, right? Does it need to be an LGBTQ, right, individual, or not at all? What are your thoughts individually on that?
I was going to say, you know, having been in the industry for, you know, 30 odd years, and I would have to say that the availability of LGBTQ role models has been scarce, if any. Where I found my inspiration from are from leaders who have been open, who have promoted inclusivity, who have just allowed personnel to be and to honor and respect that. You know, when I look at some of the people I've worked with, you know, like the lady who first hired me at BCD, Lethea Warren, you know, absolutely fantastic in that regards. You know, and various other executives within BCD. So I think we've had to look at a much broader base, and which I don't think is a bad thing, because to me it illustrates the fact that we have allies and we have people who are supportive of us around the world.
And I think that's we've lost a lot of folks too, and we had talked about this because of the AIDS crisis in the early 80s. You know, who our role models would be in place had not been. I mean, we lost quite a few folks. So I think that's where we struggle as a community too, where we don't have a lot of those role models that would be here today if not for the AIDS epidemic.
I've had some great mentors at BCD, not necessarily in the community. Some are. And I think generationally, it's shifting now because people are more comfortable being out. So hopefully Warren and Brett and I will be a mentor or a role model for millennials or people coming up that were, you know, able to be open and honest about who we are. I always say that being a lesbian is about the least interesting thing about me. You know what I mean? There's so many other facets to me. It really is the least interesting thing. So let's talk about those other things, you know?
Yeah,
but Kate, that's a good point, because sometimes people will see us as we're always trying to use like LGBT as you know, way to get attention. And you know, going back to the magazine, and that was one of the questions in the interview that they asked. How did we want our neighbors to remember us as Stephen Warren, as a member of this community? And our response was just Stephen and Warren. We don't need to be like we're the gay couple on the corner. We're just Stephen and Warren. And that's, Kate, to your point. It's like that's a good part.
Exactly.
That's just a part that's down here. You know, it's like there's so much more before that.
Right.
We just are.
Yeah. I would, Warren, venture to guess that they should remember you by your Christmas decorations.
I was Christmas and Halloween.
There is that.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, I switched to LED, so my life has gotten easier. I've jumped on board the latest tech, so it's good.
Excellent.
But do you know what I'm hearing is you know, and from that role model question, it comes back down to, you know, fundamentally, right? I think we have to find the courage, right, to be willing to say, this is what I need, but actually, you know, when you're able to be your most authentic self at work, right, you know, in an environment that's inclusive, that's where you flourish.
You thrive.
Absolutely.
That is where you flourish. And
because you're not worried about protecting your message all the time. You know, I have friends who are in the closet
Right.
You know.
And I think that is so key, because inclusion never stops. It never stops.
No.
And I just want people to understand that. I want leaders to understand that, you know, inclusion really doesn't stop. There's a great quote that I'm just going to share with you all. It's from a lady called Audre Lorde, and she says, "There's no single issue struggle, because we don't live single issue lives." And that's just, for me, that's incredibly powerful, right? Because you're right. You are Warren and Steve. You're not you're not wearing another label. You don't have to wear another label.
Now,
And
there are
if you're-
some, I mean, we're not naive to know that there are some that, oh yeah, those are the gays. I mean, but we don't associate with them. But we also have to know that that does exist, and it's still there.
Right. And, you know, and to that point, I was just going to say, Warren, you know, as we all say, just remember what a difference a gay makes. You know, really, we are innovative. We're, you know, have incredible lighting on our homes. There's an authenticity, but, you know, all that aside, yeah, I know. But all joking aside, to a point Devi said, the not being a single issue life. This is where I think, yes, we're talking about LGBTQ right now and inclusivity and that, you know, working within the environment. But, you know, it's not just about us. It's also about women. It's also about people of color. It's also about people of, you know, fluid genders, or have different thought process, etc. And we need to, as communities such as this, not be isolated. And we need to work together, incorporate each other into our thought processes, into our approaches, and support each other.
Warren,
I'm sorry, Kate.
No, that's okay. Warren, you were talking about, you know, it just being you and Steve, and it's, you know, there are some neighbors who are in, some neighbors who are out. And I tend to snuggle up to those people or get close to those people who I know have, well, no, not to make them uncomfortable, but to, you are going to love me, and I'm going to make sure of that. Do you know what I mean? Because if you get to know me, it doesn't matter that I'm gay. You're going to be like, wow, she makes a great cocktail. She's got good lipstick, and, you know, she rescues pit bulls. So I just, you know, I find it's a little bit of a challenge for me to find those people who kind of step back. I don't want to make them uncomfortable, but I want them to get to see me as Kate, not Kate the lesbian.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and I know that you're going to like me because I'm a likable person.
Love you, not like you.
Yes, exactly.
And I
agree with you saying there, Kate. And there are those that I know I can maybe push the boundaries a little bit, but, you know, in a small town where you have social media and everything else, and you know, just by doing a little creeping of, you know, where they lean, there is no point. I'm not going to waste energy in some of those folks. And I'm sure you know that.
Well,
too,
yeah.
Some of those.
Do you know something? You know, and this is me now talking out loud here, is I would love to see, you know, a travel organization, because this is the industry and the sector that we're in. It's what I'm incredibly passionate about. I would love to see a travel organization's emphasis on, and I guess it's also a challenge, on diversity and inclusion, on building just something as simple as called Be Yourself.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it out there. That's it. So that's a goal that if any organization would like to pick up, I think that would be brilliant. And as a closing question for each of you, you know, what does inclusion mean to you? And what advice would you give to leaders in the travel ecosystem today? Who would like to take that first?
I'll go. For me, inclusion is the honoring and respecting individuals that are within the organization, allowing them to be, as you just said, but allowing them to be in such a way where they are wanting to contribute, wanting to share, wanting to be authentic. And from that, I think I firmly believe that we all become better, because we're learning something, we're picking up on other ways of thinking, other thought processes of approach. So again, for me, that's what inclusion is. It's really bringing people together, allowing for individuality, allowing for different thoughts, approaches, and cultures to meld to produce a better way of life.
Love it.
Preach.
Love it.
I'll go next. I think with the social reckoning that's happened over the summer is so important, and it was long overdue. And I will say that now people are watching. People are watching by virtue of the social reckoning. And if your company is not have a tenet of diversity and inclusion, if they're not paying attention to Pride Week, or if they're not honoring and bringing people of all, disabilities, people of color, the gay community, if you're not offering a seat at your executive tables at the highest level to these people, you are not representing your customer. And there's going to be a reckoning, like I said earlier, about that too, because people are asking that question now. What does their board look like? What do their C-levels look like? So if I had to offer a piece of advice, you need to really widen your table and let people of diversity lean in a little bit and listen to those voices.
Yeah, and actually, Kate, there, I would even go as far as you need to break that table and rebuild it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep. Because there's a lot of white table out there. Too much.
Yeah.
And
Warren.
I mean, from an inclusion perspective, looking at each individual, I think it's bring to the table what you can. Because sometimes I think people are intimidated by inclusion. Like they may be out, but there are certain things that they may be an introvert. They're just not out there as much. So I think it's incumbent upon ourselves when we look at inclusion is to also look at those folks within our own circle that we're including, and how do we then get them to be their authentic selves and find out what they can bring to the table, because they may be quiet, but they're powerful behind the scenes as well. So don't look at it as inclusion as just those of us in front of the camera, these webinars, but also look and see where there's some of that detail and some great ideas behind the scenes.
Fantastic.
Not just the big mouths like us.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a close, I guess it goes back to the beginning, right? Intersectionality, it's like diversity and inclusion. It's not a buzzword. It's not a catch-all term. And that's really important, I think, for all of us, to really understand. Many companies and associations in this sector, I strongly believe, need to do more to put their commitment into practice, right? And really treat equality, right? Really treat equality and that diversity piece, whether that is the gender diversity, the ethnic diversity, even when we look at and we are talking about bringing our authentic selves to work, it is about the business priority that it really is today. And Kate even touched upon it. It's having that seat at the table. For me, it's rebuilding the table with the right representation around that having a seat, because you truly need to have individuals that represent your product, and ultimately it improves customer satisfaction. And we all know, from data points, ultimately it's an impact to your bottom line. And I'm a big believer is that, we all need to find the courage to be willing to say, this is what I need. And in doing so, we empower ourselves. And then you need to make sure you're working for people who allow you to be who you are. So with that, I'd like to thank the audience, and I would like to thank my brilliant panel here today for Kate, Brett, and Warren. I'm so thrilled, and thank you so much for the last 40 minutes. You are my role models, really, truly, you really are. For the audience, this session will be available on YouTube. We will be sharing this as well. The next Diversity and Inclusion Talks episode 3 takes place a week today, which is October the 1st. Oh my goodness, 2 p.m. British Standard Time. And the topic is compassionate leadership in uncertain times. So please tune in. Look forward to all seeing you then. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.